Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the January 6th monthly seminar for the Circle of Life Coalition. My name is Gary Hawkins, and I'm the owner and director of Griswold Home Care of Berks County, but I'm also co-founder of the Circle of Life Coalition. It's a pleasure and honor to sit in for Ms. Deb Nicholson, who is our chairperson, who could not be here this morning. A couple of things. We'd like to thank our anonymous sponsor this month. So whoever you are, thank you very much for sponsoring this seminar. We need sponsors. We need those sponsors to help us further the mission of the Circle of Life Coalition. So if you're interested in sponsoring a monthly seminar, please enter your name and email in the chat box, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Also, your questions that you have for Dr. Kimball, our presenter, should be entered in the chat box, and at the end of the presentation, we will present them to him for answering and getting that feedback. Also, about 5 minutes before the end of the presentation, you'll see a survey pop up on your screen. Please take a moment. It's only 5 questions. Please take a moment to answer those questions. It helps us in developing future seminars for the future. Double word there. But it helps us do things in the future that you may want to see and hear about. I'd like to introduce today's speaker. It's Dr. Dan Kimball. I want to read his resume, if I may. Dr. Kimball was born in Washington, D.C. and grew up in Arlington, Virginia. He is a retired internal medicine physician and a graduate of the University of Virginia with a BA in psychology and an MD degree. He spent 25 years in the Army, 15 years at the Reading Hospital, and 5 years, as a hospice medical director. He served 9 years on the PA State Board of Medicine and is a part of the leadership of the Berks County Medical Society. He is a past member of the Board of Governors and American College of Physicians, and served on its Ethics, Professionalism, and Human Rights Committee. He has been a longtime member, and past chair of the clinical ethics team at the Reading Hospital. He serves on the board of the Circle of Life Coalition and the foundation of the PA Medical Society. He serves as Stephen Minister at Atonement Lutheran Church. He is married to Dr. Eve Kimball, and they share 3 very successful children and 5 grandchildren, and they enjoy spoiling whenever they can. That's funny. So with that, we give you Dr. Kimball. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Let me just get my screen up here, and so I can see what's going on. Thanks, Gary, and a special thanks to our sponsor for support of the coalition, and Happy New Year to everybody. We're still in that first week, aren't we? I hope you're enjoying your favorite morning beverage as we explore the conversation. And I certainly hope that you keep healthy during this crazy pandemic and keep safe in whatever our upcoming wintry weather turns out to be. Deb, our chairwoman, often at the beginning of our programs shares our vision statement, and I'm using it to underline the term conversations, as you can see. I can't think of a better way to begin this presentation than focusing on that term. In that vision statement, that's what we're trying to encourage. That's what we're trying to get people to participate in as part of healthy end-of-life experiences. As a culture, we are not very good at talking about our eventual death. I think you can see this reflected well by reading the obituaries in our local paper. And you would note that rarely is someone noted to have died, but instead they have passed away, they have joined loved ones in heaven, whatever an acceptable euphemism is for having died. And I think Woody Allen captured it well in this quote, "I'm not afraid of dying, I just don't want to be there when it happens. So over the next 35 to 40 minutes, we're going to enter territory that most people do their best to avoid. We'll think together about our wishes for care through the end of our lives. And I will be highlighting the Conversation Project's free conversation starter guide, which is designed to help you get started on having a conversation with those whom are important to you. And it would be my hope that you would leave this session. When you leave this session, you would have less anxiety about starting a conversation about what matters most to you, that you will have received some useful tips and tools for initiating the conversation, and most importantly, probably, that you'll make a commitment to express your wishes and engage significant others in expressing their wishes. Now, a lot has changed since this program was founded in 2010 by Ellen Goodman and her colleagues, other than the fact that a lot of people have signed on and committed to the program's goals. But the program does continue to mature, and Deb and Gary and I thought it would be good for us to revisit the basics of this program, the conversation, since it's so important to what we want to accomplish at the coalition, as I showed you in our vision statement. Shown on this slide are some of the agenda items for this presentation, and I would emphasize, most importantly, your role in developing the conversation. This process starts with you, and I hope I can convince you of that today. I want to share with you Jill's story that was posted on the Conversation website in 2012 because it highlights what we are trying to avoid. Jill titled her story, "My Parents Shared No Information with Us." She writes, "My parents were getting older and declining in health. My mother had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 5 years previously, and my father was on dialysis for kidney failure. As a family, we used to joke that if you combine my father's cognitive health with my mother's physical health, they would live forever. Unfortunately, that was not to be. My father would continue to try to care for my mother, exacerbating his own illness, but unfortunately keeping his 4 children in the dark as far as how advanced our mother's illness was. Now you have to understand, my father was always a very independent man. He owned his own business and he did quite well financially, and he made sure that my mother had her own financial security. But he passed away before sharing any information with any of us about his financial standing, about his wishes for burial, or plans for my mother's care. We did not know who was to be named power of attorney or executor of his estate, or any of the details of his business. Now, you might think in retrospect, given the nature of his illness, we should have been more assertive about information, but growing up in the environment that we did, that did not seem to be an option at the time. So after purchasing burial plots for my father and mother and meeting with lawyers and financial professionals and acquiring all the legal paperwork to assume responsibility for my mother's well-being, we remained in the dark about what the wishes of my parents would have been. So we used our best judgment, and luckily we're mostly in agreement with each other among the 4 siblings about the care for our mother. It's 4 years later now. She has lived with me in 2 different assisted living programs and is now in a long-term care nursing facility. I maintain the power of attorney and healthcare proxy for her. But I know in my heart that this is not the life that she imagined for herself. Unfortunately, we will never know what her wishes for herself, her house, and her property would have been. We never had the conversation. So let me share with you some facts about how we as a nation are doing with advanced care planning. Most of us say that we don't want to burden our family or friends with tough decisions. But many of us have not talked about our wishes for care. Most of us say that we would want to die at home, but in fact, we don't end up doing so. Most of us acknowledge that we want to bring this topic up with our physician, but very few of us have done so. And I think this observation reflects not only on us, but some problems with our healthcare system as well, a topic for another day. Most of us say that we should put our wishes in writing, but only a few of us have done so. I want to share with you about a 4-minute ABC News clip that was done a number of years ago by Diane Saunders, when she showed a family having this discussion and the emotional experience that it can be. Let's watch that tape together.
And finally tonight, ABC News wants to join you in something right at the heart of the American family. How we can all help the people who care about us make decisions near the end of our lives. And 9 out of 10 of you have told us that we should all be talking about it at all ages, what we want. And yet only a fraction of us have done it. And we know it makes a huge difference in the health of the caregiver as well as those cared for. So ABC News has taken cameras inside a vital, loving family, part of a new community, deciding to have the conversation. This is 85-year-old Norb and his daughter Maureen.
My dad is 85 today. He's still very, very active. He's a wonderful friend.
Throughout life, daughter and father have always talked about everything, except one thing: how to control the end of your life in the same way you control the prime of your life. So dad and daughter gather the family together, 3 generations, for an act of love.
And so now we're just asking that you share some of your thoughts about what you would like at the end of your life, so that we can honor your wishes.
They are part of something new underway for families in America that says having the conversation is a gift parents and children give each other. And there's proof of the difference it makes. Studies show depression rates plummet after a loss if the families have had the conversation. Renowned physician Dr. Atul Gawande says doctors and nurses see it firsthand.
When you're there in that moment and you're talking to the family and you're saying, how much will it bother your father if he ends up this way? And they say, more often than not, I don't know. We never talked about it. That it is incredibly traumatic for the family, for the doctors involved. There's often conflict. It can tear families apart.
So Dr. Gawande has become part of a team led by Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Ellen Goodman. It is called the Conversation Project. It is a kind of guide for families looking for a way to begin.
If we give them a way to talk about it and give people something to hang on to when they're afraid to start this conversation, they can do it and pass it on.
Families like the Jennings. They looked over the conversation guide before they sat down together. First, there's laughter.
My golf swing's still good.
And then Dad directly eases his daughter's guilt and worry about having put their mother in hospice.
I felt like that meant we were giving up on Mom.
She was in a lot of pain, and I think it was handled real well.
And next, Maureen asks her dad for clarity on what he considers a good end to a great
Okay,
life.
so if you were in a condition where you couldn't make decisions for yourself, how extreme would you want us to take measures to save your life versus letting you go?
Well, I think I'm ready to go anytime. You know, I wouldn't prolong anything. I mean, I've lived a great life. Pretty lucky. And because of you guys, you know. And
Unexpectedly, a grandson is inspired to speak up about his own wishes for his own life.
That if there was no meaningful communication, that I would want you to stop trying to intervene.
we aren't ready for you to go that soon.
Well, we're not ready for you to go that soon either, so.
And one by one, the others weigh in, all ages.
Don't do that.
Happy birthday, dear Grandma.
And with that, another family has joined a kind of estate planning for the heart.
Go.
The conversation beginning in America.
So let me get back to my slides here. So I think that the emotional experience of sharing the conversation with those that we love comes through well in that news piece with Diane Saunders from ABC News. Here, Snoopy is reminding us that living every day the best that we can is most important to us. So let me move to an overview of the Conversation Project so that you have an understanding of it. The project is an initiative of the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, and it's a national public engagement initiative with a goal that is shown on this slide that is simple, but we hope transformative. That is to help everyone talk about their wishes for care through the end of life so that those wishes can be both understood and respected. So the program's goals are to raise public awareness, to provide free, easy to use guides on their website, and to connect with people wherever they live, they work, they pray, or they learn. So they've gone out and tried to reach everybody they can. Their thesis is that too many people die in a manner that they would not choose, and that too many of those left behind that matter to them are left feeling not only bereaved, but guilty and uncertain. So the project is dedicated to changing that current norm that we highlighted at the beginning. So why does the conversation matter? We would all agree, we can't plan for everything, but we can share what matters to us with family by talking about our values, about what matters most to us in our life and in our healthcare. Discussing our values and wishes and talking with important people in our lives and our healthcare team can create the foundation of a care plan that's built on what's important to us, and that plan then would be available when the need arises. So what is keeping us from having this conversation? What are the barriers that keep us from wanting to have these conversations? So I think the first one is, I guess, pretty obvious to everyone. I think we can all agree, as we've shared the joke of Woody Allen and so on, this is a very scary topic for most of us. It's not something we naturally want to bring up. The conversation can bring focus on family conflicts that we just soon avoid. Maybe the question of cremation versus burial, whatever family differences might be around dying events. we've already highlighted, we don't practice doing this, so we're not very good at it. It can focus on what are very difficult medical decisions that need to be made at or near the end of our lives. Medical decisions like those related to the use of ventilators or cardiopulmonary resuscitation questions. Obviously, these are not easy conversations to begin, like, hey, if I start, hey, Dad, I'd like to talk to you about what healthcare you might want when you're dying. I can just perceive that might not be very well perceived by the listener. And I guess lastly, these conversations require time and patience. And these are not virtues that describe most of our lives. Now, when we have a conversation with someone, we both speak and listen. And I want to emphasize that most important is the second part of this conversation, which tends to be forgotten. That is listening. We need to embrace being quiet, particularly in these conversations, and turn off our inclination to react, to respond, or to problem fix, which has the potential to bring out our own biases. It will be important to acknowledge what someone is saying, lean into those thoughts with them, those feelings, and what matters to them. As Dr. Gawande and Snoopy note, our ultimate goal is to have a good life to the very end. So we want to have these conversations, and something gets in our way. The Conversation Project hears from people that they don't want to upset those that they care about, like a family member or dear friend, by bringing up the topic. But they know that people will feel relief if they do start having this conversation. Mostly, people just don't know how to bring it up or what to talk about. This is why the Conversation Project has created these free conversation guides on many important topics, as shown on this slide. So whether it's about how to get started, which we're emphasizing today, or how to choose or to serve as a healthcare agent, how to talk effectively with our doctor, how to deal with loved ones with dementia, or be a caregiver of a child with a serious illness, there are guides on the website available to assist us in having those conversations. And you can find these on their website located at theconversationproject.org. An important recent focus of the program is the emphasis that I mentioned at the beginning during the agenda list, and that is this conversation starts with you. Our thoughts and feelings and beliefs and wishes don't just jump off of our tongues or come popping out of our heads when someone asks us, what care do you want for your end-of-life care? Though our intentions may be good, we really shouldn't be asking someone else what their wishes are if we haven't taken a little time to reflect or articulate on what our wishes are. And the program suggests that in reflecting first for ourselves on what is most important to us, we will gain some insight into the challenges that are part of having this conversation. So I'm going to invite you, as you're comfortable, to close your eyes for a minute for this exercise. Feel your body sitting in the chair, your feet on the floor, Take in a conscious breath and exhale. Breathe comfortably. This is an activity is meant to signal to you that this is the time for you. And now, in the quiet of your own heart and mind, to complete this sentence. When I think about the end of my life, what matters to me is, again, when I think about the end of my life, what matters to me is. Take just 20 seconds or so to reflect on this. Now, I've not given you enough time to come up with your what matters most statement, but it's a good start for the conversation. As Ellen Goodman reminds us, quote, "It's not what is the matter with you, it is what matters to you." And you can see at the bottom of this slide some of the things that people have suggested to the conversation project related to relationships with family members. This next slide also shows you some other examples that people shared in response to that question. You can see that they're all over the place. I think it's important to remember that there are no wrong answers here. Every answer shown here is the right answer for that person. So that's an important part of thinking about having this conversation before you even start talking. So the next section of the starter guide is about planning the talk. And again, you're going through this process before you ever have the conversation. So the project highlights that having your say in healthcare is more likely if you share how you feel about certain situations that could arise now or in the future. So this part of the guide is set up with the questions and answers on a simple sliding scale to help you express how you feel, what your values are with regard to some of the answers to these questions. And here are some of the sample questions. So for instance, what role do you want to play in the decision-making process? Are you someone who wants the healthcare team to do what they think is best? Or at the other end of the spectrum, are you someone that wants to have a say in every healthcare decision that is made? I suspect many of us are somewhere in the middle, depending on the nature of what kind of decision is being made. What kind of care do you want to receive? Are you like some of the underrepresented members of our society who typically don't have access to care, who worry that they won't get enough care? Or are you someone at the other end who worries that you'll get too much care? Or what role do you want your loved ones to play in decision making? So as you pick the answer to those questions and reflect on your values, you now have something that you can talk about in having this conversation. That's a great start. The project suggests step 3 addresses some questions, again, that you're going to consider before you start having the conversation. Who do you want to talk to? Who should be part of that conversation? Also, where would you and those that you want to talk with feel comfortable talking? Does your family have important conversations at the kitchen table, at the dining room table, or a good walk in the country enjoying the scenery? And lastly, the project is trying to get you to make a commitment to have the conversation by putting a date down when you're going to have this conversation, so that you have time ahead of time to send the same work to be done by others who are going to be involved in the conversation. All potential conversants have homework to be done, reflection and considering these questions. So something like, let's get together at Easter time when we're all together again, and we'll have this conversation. So the project is trying to get us to make a commitment to when we're going to do it. Okay, so let's acknowledge that starting a conversation involves, as I said earlier, how do you actually bring it up when I mentioned my "Hey Dad" statement? So the project offers a page of what they call icebreakers that may help you as depicted on this slide. So a simple, "Hey Dad, I need your help with something." Or, "Dad, can you and I have a conversation about," whatever you think is important. To perhaps, I was thinking about what happened to Aunt Mabel and her long time on a ventilator before she died, and I wondered what your thoughts were about that. So you can see that some of the other icebreaker ideas shown here on this slide might be useful depending on how your family has conversations, or you and significant others have conversations. I think frequently, if there's been perception of a good death or a bad death in the family experience or the friend's experience, that might be a topic that would help start the conversation. Now, the Conversation Project has found that one of the best ways to start this conversation process is by talking about a healthcare proxy first. Most of you are aware through previous programs that the coalition has done that a healthcare proxy is an individual, a family member, or significant other who would speak for you if you can't speak for yourself. And by golly, if COVID has taught us anything, it was that no matter what our age, we are all vulnerable to something unexpected happening where we may not be able to speak up for ourselves. So making sure you have a trusted decision maker, in Pennsylvania, that's called a healthcare agent or a healthcare proxy, to be your advocate is something most of us can relate to. And the project suggests, therefore, it may represent a less threatening starting point for the group discussion. Another way to put this project in perspective that I like is this letter that Ellen Boudreau, an early advisor to the coalition, wrote to her family as she was coming to the end of her life. Maybe it gives you some ideas about expressing your own wishes in that conversation. Her letter was titled, "Don't Panic, It's Okay, a Letter to My Family." Her letter reads, "If you're faced with a decision that you're not ready for, it's okay. I'll try to let you know what I would want for various circumstances. But if you come to something that we haven't anticipated, it's okay. And if you come to a decision point and what you decide results in my death, it's okay. You don't need to worry that you've caused my death. You haven't. I will die because of my illness or my body failing or whatever. You don't need to feel responsible. Forgiveness is not required. But if you feel bad or responsible or guilty, first of all, don't. And second of all, you're loved again." And then I think beautifully, and most importantly, this last paragraph, "If you're faced with a snap decision, don't panic. Choose comfort, choose home, choose less intervention. Choose to be together at my side, holding my hand, singing, laughing, loving, celebrating, carrying on. I will keep loving you and watching you and being proud of you. A very concise summary of her values. Another way to think about the conversation involves looking at this pyramid diagram, which shows us arriving at our early adult age in good health. And then as you go down the pyramid, our health trajectory to middle age, some kind of illness, perhaps to end of life situation. And the pyramid is meant to emphasize the importance as a young adult of beginning this process by having an advanced directive and naming a healthcare proxy, or as I said, in Pennsylvania, healthcare agent. And then down the line as middle adult, perhaps when we have young adult children or aging parents, completing this conversation starter guide with the group might be important. And as serious illness develops or we approach for whatever reason the end of life, then other medical orders or end of life issues. So I think that's a useful diagram, and it's meant to emphasize this beginning point that we all should have a healthcare agent appointed early in our lives with an advanced directive. So here are some tips from the Conversation Project that I hope would help you think about and have the conversation. First of all, be patient. Some people may need a little more time to think than others. And you don't have to steer the conversation, just let it happen. Remember the listening part. Don't be a judge. A good death means different things to different people. Remember that nothing is set in stone on what you agree with at this point. You can always change your minds as medical circumstances change or as situations change, and that every attempt at conversation is valuable. This is probably the first of many conversations. You're not going to cover everything in one conversation. So as they summarize, each conversation will empower you and your loved ones. You're getting ready to help each other live and die in the manner and a way that you would choose. The Conversation Project also suggests that it may be very useful to take some time after that initial conversation or a tough conversation to reflect back on the conversation. Was there some point that you made that needs additional emphasis or clarification in a subsequent conversation? Was there some point you tried to make or wanted to make that was misunderstood or misinterpreted? Was there someone who was not present at the conversation that needs to be included in the next conversation? Like siblings who don't agree on anything, who should hear the information at the same time. How did the conversation make you feel? And what do you want to be sure to remember? And what do you want the others in the conversation to be sure to remember? Maybe these are things that need to be repeated and re-emphasized in subsequent conversations. I want to close our presentation with a quote by Dr. Gowande during a recent interview when he was asked about what he learned writing his book, Being Mortal, that he hadn't known before he wrote the book. And by the way, if you have not read his book, Being Mortal, I highly recommend it. But Dr. Gowande responded, I think the thing that emerged was that in the end, understanding mortality was not actually about dying or about having a good death. It's about how you have a good life all the way to the very end. He said, I realize that this incredibly scary subject of dying isn't so scary after all, because it's really about living. He said, for me, the lesson was that people have priorities in their life besides just wanting to live longer. And to know what people's priorities are, you have to ask them. And we don't ask. So I think this is a good point for your questions and comments, and we'll end this little slideshow there and see what questions there might be.
So far, Dr. Kimball, there haven't been any, but one
Okay.
but one that came to me, and Dr. Kimball and I had done a TV show together earlier in the week, and I asked it at that time, and I'll ask it again. Do you believe that the hardest part of this whole thing is the start, the beginning?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's why they developed that icebreaker list, you know.
Right.
I think we all on the program could agree that our choice of words in the conversation is absolutely critical. So I think that in having the conversation, sharing with others your own values that you've reflected on before the conversation is probably critical. You know, dad, mom, kids, I've been thinking, maybe because of my serious illness, you know, what my care wants to be when the time comes for me to die. I think it's important for you to know that, and maybe you could share with me what your thoughts are. Maybe you don't have any thoughts, but love to have you reflect and think about that. So the choice of those words and how to start the conversation, yes, very critical.
We did have one question here. Can they get a copy, or can this individual, and I would assume maybe others, if they want, a copy of the presentation slides?
Yeah, all the information that was on those slides is on the Conversation Project website. So
Okay.
there's nothing that I showed there that's not on the website. I don't think the joke is on the website. and the I don't remember. I think the ABC News clip may be on there somewhere as well.
Okay, very good. I don't have any other questions here. So what I want to do, one takeaway I had is that the conversation, I wrote this down, is very important. It gives a comprehensive tool to start the conversation and move forward on documenting your wishes, which is something that so many of us say we're going to do, just like you said in the presentation, but we don't. And that's sad that we're not doing it. When you had us do the meditation, the one thing I thought about, or the moment of silence, was my 8-year-old daughter. She's the most important to me. And what have I done for her? What does she need to know? And for me, that was it right there. That was it in a nutshell. And it helped me connect with that. So thank you so much, Dr. Kimball, for your presentation today. We really, really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to do it.
Thank you. Just a reminder, next month's seminar is called Elder Financial Abuse, How to Spot It and What to Do, presented by Mr. Dennis Pellegrini. That's February 3rd, 8:15 a.m. to 9:15 a.m. The link will be on the Facebook page. This video will also be on the Facebook page and our website by the end of the business day today. And I want to thank everyone for attending. If you haven't completed the survey that just came up, please do so. It helps us plan our seminars for the future. It gives us a better idea of what you may be looking for. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and we'll see you next month. Take care.